Tov, everyone. It is Tuesday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset. Therefore, it must be the Rabbis Discuss with Rabbi and Rabbi Ancel. Let's see what we got in the chat room right now. We have Crystal and we have Marshall and some watching in the background and more to come. Okay, so we are going to continue our discussion. Oh, Marilyn has joined us. Good to see you, Marilyn. We're going to continue our discussion that we started last week on the history of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. And let me just do this first. We are very fortunate tonight that the author of the article that we read last week is with us, Mr. Adrian Morgan, who was with Family Security Matters. He's a contributing editor. He is a British-based writer and artist who has written for the Western Resistance since its inception. He also writes for, or did write for, Sparrow News. He was previously contributed to various publications, including The Guardian and New Scientist, and is a former fellow of the Royal Anthropological Society. So let's bring Adrian and Rabbi Ancel in, and you're on, gentlemen.
Hello. Good evening. Hello.
Okay, so last week we read your article from a while ago on Hamas, and tonight we were going to get into the article on the Muslim Brotherhood, but it seems that you have more information since that article came out in, well, let's see, what was the date on that article anyway?
It's going back a while.
It was a while ago, yeah.
Trying to find the date.
Oh, yeah. I mean, June 5th, 2007.
Wow. So and the other one, the Muslim Brotherhood, anti-Semitism, and so on, that's from 2009. So I've done a bit more research and got a few resources together, so we can talk about more modern things. But the history remains the history. What is now happening is trying to relate that history to what's going on today and why things have happened the way that they have. And I think, there are links. The fact that Iran was behind the funding of that terrible attack on October the 7th. It is very interesting that a senior Muslim Brotherhood member, when they had the Arab Spring and it evaporated, there was this man who had been originally with the World Muslim League, and Kamal el-Halbawi was his name. He became the first Muslim Brotherhood member to go to Iran, which is a Shia nation, and generally, the Muslim Brotherhood accepts Shia, but they don't really treat them as being fully Muslim. And he is the person who set up in the United Kingdom the Muslim Brotherhood organizations, the Muslim Council of Britain and the Muslim Association of Britain. And they have been involved with a lot of dodgy politics. They've infiltrated and advised the UK governments of Blair and of the Conservatives as well. And they've also been advisors to Obama. They started off the iftar dinners, for example, in the White House. So it's very difficult when dealing with politicians and their histories. They've had a dealing with a lot of Muslim Brotherhood members posing as being representatives of the Islamic community. And they have an agenda, and the agenda they have is to take over all of the so-called Palestinian region, the region of Palestine and Transjordan in the time of the Palestinian Mandate. They just want Israel to be wiped off the face of the earth. There is no compromise. And that has always been since the 1920s when the Muslim Brotherhood was founded. And it's exactly, but that's the whole thing. It was founded, the Muslim Brotherhood founded in 1928 in Egypt, and it fed into a lot of the things which Hamas in 1987 said in Article 2 that it was a wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. And in a minute, I just need a bit of a breathing matter. I've got a bit of a thing in my throat at the moment. Just need to catch my breath.
Well, why don't I'll read part of the article and then give you a chance to comment on it and bring us up to date.
Great. Yeah, that'll be good.
Okay,
Thanks.
So the article goes on to say, and again, remember that this was written back in 2007.
Back to front. Yeah.
The Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 1928, as Adrian said, in Egypt by a school teacher, Hassan al-Banna. He had been born in, Mahmoudiya, near Cairo. Like I said before, the last time, I'm having a hard time pronouncing these names, and you know what? I don't care. Okay, so near Cairo on October 14, 2006, the eldest son of a watch repairer, Ahmad ibn Abd al-Rahman al-Banna. Though his family was never wealthy, it upheld a long tradition of Islamic scholarship. Al-Banna was an imam who had graduated from Cairo's Al-Azhar University, the largest Sunni seminary in the world. Ahmad spent 40 years of his life compiling and cataloging an estimated 45,000 reports of the sayings and deeds of the Prophet Muhammad, and most respected collector of such hadith, Bukhari, 1810 to 810 to 870 AD, including only 2,062 of these quotations in his collection, which he considered to be a sahih or authentic. So I'll give you you want me to continue?
Yeah.
Okay. Hassan al-Banna was taught to memorize the Quran at a young age and trained to be a teacher. He started teaching in 1927. It was in March 1928 that Hassan al-Banna, his brother Gamal, and 5 others gathered at his home to make a pledge to live and die for Islam. Thus was founded the Muslim Brotherhood, 1928. It is in its initial years, the Ikhwa uh, functioned as a youth organization engaged in dawah, or missionary work. Its political philosophy grew as its membership increased. Al-Banna considered himself to be Sufi, which is essentially apolitical, and belonged to the Hasafiya Sufi order, whatever that is. Despite the wrong side of the street for me. Uh, Despite this, there were global political issues that concerned him. On March 23rd, 1924, the last caliphate, that of the Ottomans, was dissolved by Kemal Ataturk.
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 Now that was in Turkey. Now that is one of the most important things that motivate not only the Muslim Brotherhood, but also there's a group called Hizbut Tahrir. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood founded in 1928, that's fine, in Egypt. Now, that's had great influence, and Hamas is in its in its charter, Article 2, it states specifically that it is a wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. But not only that, in 1953, there was a group founded in Jerusalem by a former jurist for the Ottoman Caliphate. He used to give pronouncements on whether people should marry, or how much a wife should get if she was being divorced. And he set up a group called Hizbut Tahrir. Now, in Britain at the moment, we've had lots of protests about what's been going on in Gaza, i.e. supporting the Hamas invasion of basically, Israel on October the 7th and all that's happened since. Now, they're protesting against the Israelis. Now, Hizbut Tahrir has been the most vocal in calling for real, bloodthirsty, things, breaking the law, not being punished for it. But Hizbut Tahrir has been banned in a lot of countries. Most Arab countries have banned it because they, just like the Muslim Brotherhood, they've got this idea that the caliphate is the ideal society where you have, there have been loads of caliphates of different, stripes, but the last one from the 16th century up until 1923 to 1924 was the Ottoman one. Now, the Ottomans, they, based in Istanbul, Constantinople before that. They hadn't even they weren't Arabic originally. They had come in from near the Altai Mountains in Asia. They had swept in an invasion in about the 10th and 11th centuries, and by 1200 they were at the doors of Byzantium, Constantinople, Istanbul, call it what you will, and eventually took over. And then within 200 years, they became the caliphate. And from then, they had a continuous rule. Under a caliphate, that is regarded as, for both of these main groups, that's the most important thing. And without the caliphate, that was what motivated Hassan al-Banna to found the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. And he started off getting people who were young kids, getting them to have soccer teams and things like that to motivate them. And it became, by 1948, when Israel was being founded, the Muslim Brotherhood sent 10,000 people into Israel as it was becoming. And also they had a mass campaign of killing and attacking Jewish shopkeepers in Egypt. Hassan al-Banna himself was killed in 1949. But the issue of Hizb ut-Tahrir, their desire for a caliphate is something that is much more hands-on. In Russia, they banned them. Most of states like Tajikistan, which under the Soviet Empire were satellite areas belonging to Russia, at its heart, they had the biggest resistance to Soviet authority. And after that, the authority of Putin and others was all being challenged by violence, not extreme violence, but they used to blow up checkpoints and things like that. So they're banned in all of the Arab countries, Hizb ut-Tahrir, and they're also banned in a lot of Western countries. Germany has banned them. Britain hasn't. They're allowed to carry on. But it's this idea of the caliphate where people of the book would be allowed to live as long as of the book, the people who studied the Bible or the Christian Bible could live in peace as long as they paid a tax. I mean, there's things in the Quran about, that you have
That's
to...
the jizya, right?
Yes, the jizya tax, that's it. And
I think the only country right now that is considered a caliphate is Iraq.
Right. But there are minor caliphates, but the global caliphates, that is what the Muslim Brotherhood and the Hizb ut-Tahrir, they want. A global caliphate where one can go, if you have any issue with politics or disagreements, you can go and get a judgment in your favor or against you from this central control. And, in some ways, the last Ottoman Caliphate, even though there was the Armenian genocide, where Armenian Christians were marched out of Turkey back to Armenia, and many died of starvation along the way. But apart from that, and a few, Mehmed II, I think he was, the last actual caliph, he had a few attacks on Christians and Jews, but overall it had been fairly peaceful and fairly moderate. They still had bastinado, whereas if you transgressed, you'd be held upside down and the soles of your feet would be whipped with sticks, what a painful torture. But he was fairly, by comparison to his ancestors, he was fairly moderate. I mean, the idea of moderacy, back in the time of Queen Elizabeth, the caliph then, he had become, he had 19 brothers, and in order to get himself to be the one who would be the actual caliph, as soon as his father died, he had his 19 brothers strangled in their beds. So not always, that's a bit of a diversion, but, that's one of the things about caliphates, which they don't make them to be nice. And according to the law of the Pact of Umar, Omar was the second caliph of the Islamic world after Muhammad. And he decided that anybody who was a Jew or a Christian should not be allowed to live in houses overlooking Muslims. They had to have second-class status. The idea of when Hitler had his Star of David on people in concentration camps, this was something that had gone on in Egypt for a long time. There was a mad caliph of Egypt, a Fatimid caliph, called Al-Masri, and he decided that everybody who worked for him, who was a Christian or a Jew, had to have special types of cloth and clothing. This goes back to the Pact of Omar, from the second caliph, who had written it down. But I mean, he actually took it into practice, and it was called the Law of Giyar, Ghiyyar, the Law of Differentiation. And that's a bit of a digression, but this idea of segregating people who you accept into the caliphate, the ones who are allowed to practice their faith are not allowed to practice it freely. They still have to be second-class citizens. And it's actually in the Quran, in chapter 9, there's the Quran, there's a bit about how the people of the book should be subjugated until they are second-class citizens and pay the jizya tax. So a caliphate is what the ultimate goal of the Muslim Brotherhood, which would include Hamas, who are an active ingredient, what the Iranians, the Shias in Iran, they would also agree with it. And Hizb ut-Tahrir would also approve of having a caliphate, and they would fight to get that caliphate to be created. But if they did do that, they would fight each other to the death because they wouldn't agree who was going to control it.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, they've been doing it since 700.
Well, exactly. That's how the caliphates became the caliphates. They did it by struggle of violence and war against any opposition. Hardly peaceful, and it's not stable either. Once one caliph dies, total insecurity until the next caliph takes his place.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, the thing with Hamas, their charter is very, very specifically based upon, you see, what happened in the 1920s. Now there was a man called Haj Amin al-Husseini. When you had the British Mandate, which was for Palestine and Transjordan, Palestine was the region where Israel, including the Gaza region, on the left-hand side, or the western side of the River Jordan, and Transjordan eventually became Jordan.
Right.
And the British were meddling, and Herbert Butler was the person who was in charge of Hamas, not of Hamas, sorry, in charge of the British Mandate. And in that period, especially towards the end, that's when they started to import books by the Arabs there, became popular readers of Hitler's Mein Kampf. Now, the thing about Mein Kampf, it means struggle.
Right.
We've heard in Britain with these protests recently against Israel that jihad, it just means, it's a struggle. Now, for Hitler and his struggle, his Mein Kampf, and jihad meaning struggle, in the Palestinian Mandate, the best-selling book was a translation of Hitler's Mein Kampf. It chimed the anti-Semitism, relics of the protocols of the elders of Zion almost worked into it. It became very popular.
Well,
now,
even
Herbert Butler was the person who he made a man called Haj Amin al-Husseini. He made him into the Mufti of Jerusalem. Now, at that time, it was a really bad idea because from 1920 onwards, the so-called Mufti, Haj Amin al-Husseini, had been killing Jews, basically having little mini pogroms against them. Because since the middle of the 19th century, a lot of Jews had established themselves in Israel from Britain. I mean, we have people like Lord Shaftesbury was a supporter of, Jews having a homeland in Israel or in Palestine. And this man became incredibly popular, even though he was a real danger. He was given all this power. When war broke out between Britain and the Allies against Germany, Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Mufti of Jerusalem, went in November 1940, he went to visit Hitler. Hitler welcomed him. There are photographs of him there. He also became friends with Adolf Eichmann, and he was given his own home in Potsdam, where he could work with Eichmann at his leisure. There was a potential for swapping prisoners of war who were Polish soldiers. And they could have swapped the lives of Jewish children or, for these Polish prisoners or not. And the famous comment made by Haj Amin al-Husseini was, "They're little Jews now, they'll grow up to be big Jews." And so all of these children were sent off to Theresienstadt concentration camp. Now, this odious character, at the end of the war, he fled, apparently dressed as a woman. And like many other Nazis, he had taken refuge in Egypt under Nasser.
Mm-hmm.
Nasser had originally worked with the Muslim Brotherhood until about 1948, when he fell out with them.
Do we know why the fallout between Nasser and the Muslim Brotherhood was? Because I've never actually seen anything that actually clearly stated why.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the idea was that by supporting Nasser, the Muslim Brotherhood were expected to get rewards. Now, they were expecting to get a position of influence in Nasser's government. He was fighting against the Suez Canal. He took it over and things. And basically, they just got a little office for WAQF, W-A-Q-F. WAQF is a weird term in Arabic. It means two things. It's both, in terms of Palestine, what the Hamas says is that a WAQF is a legacy, an endowment from God. Now, they regard Palestine, what is Israel now, as a WAQF. In Egypt, the WAQF office, which was given to the Muslim Brotherhood, it was more to do with Muslim education in schools. So it was a very small part. It didn't have any real political influence. And then February the 12th, 1949, Hassan al-Banna, he got shot dead. And it's sort of, the Muslim Brotherhood went a bit off the rails for a while. And then later you got Sayyid al-Qutb. He became more important until he was eventually hanged in 1965. Now, Sayyid Qutb was a rabid anti-Semite, and blamed the Jews for absolutely everything. I don't know if he's still alive, but he had a brother called Mohammed Qutb, who was a lecturer at one of the Saudi universities. I think he's probably dead by now. But the resentment of between 1948 and 1951, sort of the WAQF department in Egypt it's sort of, Saeed Qutb was the head of that. He went to America. When he was on the boat going to America, there was an American woman who tried to get into his room, and he, was very upset about it and pushed her out, and she landed on the deck, with a thump apparently. And he wrote a book called The America I Have Seen. And he wrote in this primitiveness can be seen in the spectacle of the fans as they follow a game of football or watch boxing matches or bloody, monstrous wrestling matches. This spectacle leaves no room for doubt as to the primitiveness of the feelings of those who were enamored with muscular strength and desire it. I mean, he was basically not a very happy man, but he wrote some really very savage things. And the Muslim Brotherhood, what's important to understand in terms of left-wing policies, I just need to just drink water, one second. Right. In American universities in 1960, the MSA, the Muslim Students Association, was started by Muslim Brotherhood members who were in America. And they had this notion of educating people that poor Palestinians were being oppressed because Israel had been founded by 1948. And they had this idea that Palestinians were being victimized. And they were encouraging student societies and student unions to have this indoctrination. Then again, later in Britain in 1960, I think it was 66 or 7, shortly after that, they had the FOSIS, it was called, the Federation of Student Islamic Societies, came onto campuses, starting off in Cambridge and Oxford. And most of the things that they were publishing were translations of the works of Saeed Qutb, but most importantly, Hassan al-Banna, the person who was shot dead in the market in Egypt in 1949, who was the original founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, this character, Hassan al-Banna, now he's very important in understanding the violence of Hamas and everything. Though Hassan al-Banna had his limits in what he would do, he did send 10,000 people off to Israel to fight the Jews. But what is important is that he had a daughter. Now, his daughter married a man called Saeed Ramadan. Now, you may have heard of a man called Tariq Ramadan, who's actually he was jailed for sexual impropriety against women not so long back, but he'd been very influential. Now, Saeed Ramadan, the father of Tariq Ramadan and his brother Hani Ramadan. Now, Hani Ramadan, he had in Geneva, he was in charge of the mosque there, where he would, he also very much into stoning women who were adulterous and things like that. He was saying, we can't do it here in Switzerland, but I wish we could. Mm-hmm. But the Saeed Ramadan was to be very influential in a different way. After you had 9/11, now this was 2001, in November 2001, the head of the Al-Taqwa Bank, now he was living in a place called Campione d'Italia. Now, the Al Taqwa Bank is, it was the Muslim Brotherhood Bank. It was the first major international Muslim bank because, according to Islam, usury is forbidden. They were able to get with the Al Taqwa Bank, they had ways of making money. I mean, in the past, you had things a bit like American Union. They had ways of transferring money where you would do favors for people, but Hawala it was called. But I mean, the Hawala system was being investigated after 9/11 to try and find out how these people had been, who had carried out the 19 people who had carried out the bombings, the plane crashes and so on. They were trying to find out, who these people were. Now, when they when police and American agents in November 2001 went to the home of this man, Yusuf Nada, now they found a document written in Arabic. Now, this document was written by Sayyid Ramadan, the son-in-law of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna, father of Tariq Ramadan and Sayyid Ramadan. And this project had... Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah. This project was basically a 12-point plan. It was a plan to basically take over the West and to get the important aspects. It was actually more than 12 points, but to take over the West ideologically. And in this, it would foster one of the points of departure. There were various aspects of this which were, listed out.
Right.
Mostly to do with finance, expanding, financial things, but also it was to one of their points of departure stated very clearly that the intention was to use Israel and the Palestinian issue as the touchstone for getting the passion and political drive to move all of this forward.
Okay,
now,
so let's hold there.
Okay, I just want to say that the document was written in 1981, not discovered until 20 years later. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'll have a break. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna take our 6-minute break now. Give Adrian a chance to have something to drink and rest his voice a little bit. And I'm going to turn you gentlemen down for the moment.
Okay.
And we are going to, like I said, we are going to take our break now. And when we come back, we'll hear more from Adrian Morgan about the history and the background of the Muslim Brotherhood and their attachment to Hamas, as well as others. And so please, everyone, please stay tuned.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. now, on with the show.
And we are back. Thanks for everybody for sticking around. I hope you're getting some good information from the show tonight. Richard, I see you joined us, and Shoshi, and yeah, everybody who's watching in the background. Let's bring Rabbi Ancel and our good friend Adrian back in. And you're back on, gentlemen?
I'm here.
Hello.
Yep.
Okay. So at this point, we kind of got up to about the 1980s, didn't we?
Yes, we did. We did.
I guess the thing that really surprises me is that the Muslim Student Association is as old as it is.
Yeah.
Because we never really started seeing a lot, well, at least in the media, lot in the media about the Muslim Student Association until, well, not relatively recent, during the Obama administration.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, though, I remember when I went to college.
Yeah, because we had Farrakhan, we had Obama and Farrakhan.
All right.
So
I went to college in London in 1976. Was it 75? And when I went there, there was already this the left wing had taken over the Students' Union, and they already had this indoctrination about Israel bad, Palestine good. You know, they had this sort of divisions. They'd already got their way with the student unions across Britain. And I don't think it was until, Menachem Begin and I can't remember the Egyptian, the guy who got blown up eventually, when they had their peace deal in 1978, that didn't change anything. People were still making out that sort of Israel was some sort of Nazi organization and the Palestinians were these poor little victims.
yeah,
I really think this sort of false meme that had been spread around, it had been mostly spread around among students who never left that idea behind. Even when they became studying things, they still had this notion. It was very effective. And I think that, this sort of using students and indoctrinating them, and then with teachers, now we've got it with the trans lobby and everything, teaching little boys that they can be girls if they want to, who are trapped in the wrong body. And, the indoctrination of the young is really quite toxic. And a lot of the most vocal people on these marches for Palestine, when people interview them, they haven't got a clue of what the situation of Israel, Palestine, and Transjordan and everything's all about.
well,
They've got no clue
large percentage of them,
But that's the problem
they're
that
chanting
I have.
from the river to the sea, and you ask them, and they have no idea what river.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very sad.
May I make a comment?
Yeah,
My
sure, of course you
problem is that
Yes.
Hello?
most of them never read the Quran.
No, true. Mind you, the Quran's
Most
very
of them
difficult
don't
to
know
read.
how to read because most of them are illiterate.
Yeah, but the problem with the
And
Quran,
then if
trying
you
to
read the
read
Quran, I call the Quran the book of death. But
Yeah.
it is. But if you look at the section which is called Surah 5,
Yes.
Muhammad said the land specifically belongs to the Jews, and they still don't want to accept their own God. And it's the same thing with Catholicism. They say that that JC was a Jewish rabbi. Okay, so you pray to a Jewish rabbi, you kneel to a Jewish rabbi, but you hate Jews. So you're hating your own God. So,
Right.
which to me doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but anti-Semitism in the Christian world's gone. I mean, long before Islam came about. I mean, before the Third Lateran, the Third Council of Nicaea. I mean, that was when it was basically stating that Jews should be not, encouraged. They should be kept secret. But before that, there were from the early Christians. They realized that they were parasitizing and repurposing an original religion, and they felt those who were continuing the faith were people to be shunned and avoided. When they had the first crusade, in the 11th century under Urban the whatever it was, when these people set off on their crusade, by the time they even got to the coast, they'd gone through northern France and the Netherlands and through Germany. They'd slaughtered about half of the Jews in Germany along the way because they were different. There's ingrained, unfortunately. I mean, the Lateran Council of 1215 again put into Catholic orthodoxy the idea of Jews were to be shunned. We had pogroms here in the UK. I mean, very famously, I think it was 12 it was after Richard the Lionheart come back from the Crusades, or was about to go to the Crusades. You had at Clifford's Tower, you had all of the Jewish people were encouraged to take refuge in a place called Clifford Tower, and then that was set on fire and they were burned alive.
Mm-hmm.
And it was when they had the plague broke out, you had Jews were being blamed for that and killed for it. Across Europe into Russia, the blood libels, you've got all of these cases in many cathedral towns. There are stories of these little boy child saints. I mean, they took the idea of circumcision to mean something very different to what it actually was. And they would get this idea that young boys and children will be taken, the original blood libel, that they would take young children and sacrifice them for their blood. And occasionally if a child had fallen off a building, they say, it was a Jew that did it. I mean, where I live, there's a place nearby called Tewkesbury with an abbey. And there was a story
They
from
would drink the blood.
Yes. And that was in Russia. You had the same memes were going on. So these blood libels have been there with Christianity, at least from the 3rd century onwards.
Okay, so we kind of made a left turn here.
I'm sorry.
So no. I mean, it's all fascinating stuff, but I'm gonna kind of re-rail the track. And
sorry, after derailing it, yeah.
But so how do we get from the Muslim Brotherhood and their connection to not just Hamas, but other terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, Al Qaeda?
Right. Well, Hezbollah. Okay, now Hezbollah are different.
Okay.
Now, Hezbollah are based in Lebanon.
Yeah.
Now, just Iran funds the Hezbollah, and it also funds Hamas, and it has done so for a very, very long time. But Iran is Shia. Now, it isn't Sunni, but they have this idea. Ayatollah Khomeini set up this thing called Al-Quds Day. Al-Quds is the name of Jerusalem to them. And the thing is, what is so ironic about this idea of Jerusalem being sacred, it all boils down to something as silly as a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Muhammad never ever conquered Jerusalem.
He never
What he
even went
did
there.
was
The Quran doesn't mention the Jerusalem at all.
he had a dream. He had a dream where a flying horse with a human face took him on his back from Jerusalem, and he said that there was a mosque nearby, could have been the remains of the Second Temple, perhaps, or not. And then he was ascended, carried up into heaven, and there was given a choice of things to drink, and he said, I will drink milk because it's knowledge, and so on. And he recounted to his friends back in Arabia about this dream. And they said, oh, describe it. And he said what he saw from above. Oh, that's Jerusalem, that is Jerusalem. And yet he had never set foot in it. And all of this fear about the Al-Aqsa Mosque might get destroyed. I mean, it's all based on a dream.
Well, actually,
And not a very nice dream.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the pictures that were taken in the late 1800s, early 1900s of the Temple Mount, I mean, the Al-Aqsa Mosque was basically falling in on itself. I mean, the whole platform was overgrown. It was being used as a garbage dump, basically.
Right.
And, you know, it never became anything sacred to Islam until Israel became Israel.
But it was one of the first things, though, that Ayatollah Khomeini did was, I mean, he needed something to keep the revolution going. And just like with the Muslim Brotherhood Project, okay, that was from 1981, you know, which was a bit later. The idea of having something to fight against, it was something that it rallied people around him. Until he died, and then you ended up with weirdos like the person who I think I mentioned about Ayatollah Mesbah Yazdi and his Hojatieh Society to you before, I think. And they have this idea that they have a thing called the 12th Imam. There are various, in Shia Islam, they all have a different idea of the succession of caliphs. You know, the caliphate idea is still, even though they don't have a caliphate, it's still an important thing. But, you know, you've got the son-in-law of Muhammad. His daughter married a man called Ali. Now, Ali was the person who washed Muhammad's body when he died. And they thought that he was going to be the successor. But apparently Omar and Uthman both decided to threaten Ali al-Talib, as he was known. And so he didn't become the caliph. So the first caliph was the person who was the father of Muhammad's child bride, Aisha, and then Omar, then Uthman, and then Ali became. Now, after Ali, there was a guy called the Shia. When there was the Battle of Karbala, and the son and grandson of Ali were both killed. I mean, Ali got killed in a mosque by somebody with a sword. But his son and grandson, Hussein in particular, who was meant to succeed him, didn't, because he was killed in the Battle of Karbala. And so you get where there are breaks in these chains of the Shia followers from Ali, who believed that Ali should have been the first caliph. You have the Zayyidi. Zayd was the person who came after sort of Ali in the Shia Now, Zayed, he was killed as well. He was decapitated. Now, in Yemen, the people who are fighting with the Saudis, they're Shia, but they are Zayedis. So they are called the fourers, you know what I mean, or fivers, I mean. The fivers, and then you've got the seveners of the Ismaili. Then you've got the Alawi, who are, I think they're a version of the Twelvers, and the Shia in Iran are also Twelvers. They believe that their last prophet or imam, his father had been killed, and this young boy did the. I think I mentioned this, last week. Not so long back. The young boy did the funeral service for his father and then disappeared. He went into what was called grand occultation. Now, this is where the Hojatio Society is really, really weird. They believe that in his grand occultation, the only way for the end times to happen are when the 12th Imam, who was a child, he was disappeared. They believe he lives down a well in the holy city of Qom, which there is a Qom in Syria apparently, but this is the holy city of Qom in Iran. And they put letters down the well to talk to him. And the idea is that for him to come back, the world must be plunged into chaos.
Exactly, yeah.
And when Ahmadinejad became the president of Iran in 2005 or 6, he was always talking about nuclear weapons. He didn't have the ability to make nuclear weapons, but he was threatening that he could and that he would nuke Israel. It was a rallying point. I mean, this was carrying on from the Al-Quds days, which were implemented by Khomeini, who died in 1989. But it was in 2005, that's when Iran's foreign policy took on a really quite brutal aspect to them. And there's been the old guard of the old imams and the more political younger ones. I mean, they've had their own plot. Now, the thing is, I mentioned earlier on Kemal el-Helbawi, this founder of the British Muslim groups, the Muslim Council of Britain, and he also founded the Muslim Association of Britain. Now, the Muslim Association of Britain, from 1990, he, for a few years, the guy who ran it was a man called Mohammed Sawala, who's been involved with organizing anti-Israel protests. And he used to be on the West Bank. He was a Hamas operative called Abu Akada. And he fled to Britain, and he's now living in a house in Britain, in London, a council house which he bought. And he has influenced police officers on how they can do arrests. I mean, it's unbelievable the influence these people have got. But back to Iran. Iran has this end times notion. The body of the secular people in Iran, the political people, they may not dress like the mullahs. They've been attacking women who don't have, their headscarves on properly, but they have been systematically taking money from people, from Americans, from America, where they've had American citizens who are half Iranian who've been imprisoned on false charges. We've had, people here in Britain, and we've paid blackmail money to them. So they've managed to fund this excursion, if you can call it that, into Israel on October the 7th. They didn't even have to fund it themselves. They got the so-called enemy, the evil empire of the West, to fund the massacre of Israeli civilians and the hostage taking. They didn't care about Hamas. Hamas doesn't care about the people in Gaza either. They wanted human shields.
Right.
And it's just a continuation of this virulent hate. Now, the people who are in the Hezbollah are in the south of Iran. When you had Beirut blow up in 1975-6, and they've had civil wars in there for ages. The French took over one bit, and that's where the control of this one region of the south is all under Iranian. I mean, Hassan Nasrallah controls them, but they are all basically Shia Muslims and very, very well organized. They have military rallies. They go, try and attack the Golden Heights and things like that.
Yeah.
But they're very dangerous, but they've also been involved in South America.
Oh, really?
They've had, yes, attacks on Jewish communities in South America. Bomb attacks.
Now, Crystal has a question.
Yeah.
She says, when Iran raised the black flag on the biggest mosque there in Iran a couple of weeks ago, he says, was that them declaring war, or that the Mahdi has arrived, or both?
No, I don't think the Mahdi won't arrive just yet. The Mahdi, I think they need, but according to the tenets of the Hojatiya Society, who were very influential, the leader will only reappear when the world is plunged into chaos.
Complete chaos, yeah.
Yes. But I mean, that also then feeds back into this thing with the Hamas and their beliefs. I mean, Hamas believe, very seriously that at the end, and it's in the hadiths of Bukhari and the hadiths of Muslim. Okay, this is from Article 7 of the Hamas Charter. I'm just going to read you out something. The universality of Hamas. Hamas is one of the links in the chain of jihad in the confrontation with the Zionist invasion. It links up with the setting out of the martyr Izzeddin al-Qassam and his brothers in the Muslim Brotherhood who fought the Holy War in 1936. Now, 1936 to 1939, there was an uprising in Palestine against the British. That was the war where, Al-Qassam, all the rockets are called Al-Qassam, made from pipes, meant to be used for plumbing, and they make these ropey little pipe missiles out of them. Anyway, this is from Article 7, the universality of Hamas, from the Hamas Charter. It further relates to another link of the Palestinian jihad and the jihad and efforts of the Muslim Brotherhoods during the 1948 war, and to the jihad operations of the Muslim Brothers or Brotherhood in 1968 and thereafter. But even if the links have become distant from each other, and even if the obstacles erected by those who revolve in the Zionist orbit aiming at obstructing the road before the jihad fighters had rendered the pursuance of jihad impossible. Nevertheless, the Hamas has been looking forward to implement Allah's promise, whatever time it might take. The Prophet, prayer and peace be upon him, said, "The time will not come until Muslims will fight the Jews and kill them, until the Jews hide behind rocks and trees, which will cry, 'O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me. Come on and kill him.' This will not apply to the Garkad, which is a Jewish tree," cited by Bukhari and Muslim. Now, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him. They also mention about the river to the sea in the Hamas Charter.
Yeah.
They want a war. No matter how peaceful, no matter how humane, civilized, medically advanced Israel is, they want to destroy them because they are Jews. And it is something that is inescapable. There is no negotiation that will work with terrorists, and this is what they are. Hamas are terrorists. The Muslim Brotherhood are terrorists. And then I was talking in the break with Rabbi Ancel about how people in Britain and America became captured by a document that was published in the beginning of 2007 by people, a man called Stephen Leakin and Robert, I think it was Brooke, Leakin and Brooke, Leikeen and Brooke, called the Moderate Muslim Brotherhood. Now, this was a document which basically stated that instead of fighting with Al-Qaeda, why don't we make a deal with the Muslim Brotherhood? They wear suits and ties, but they don't blow people up. And I mean, they actually tried to implement it. You had, at the beginning of 2005, in April, you had Nancy Pelosi. She was in a Damascus market trying to persuade al-Assad there, who's still in there, you know, that they should become listening to the Muslim Brotherhood. And then Steny Hoyer, leader of the House, 5 days later was in Egypt talking to Syed al-Khatami, who was head of the Muslim Brotherhood group in Hosni Mubarak's government. And when Obama was put in place as the head of the American presidency, one of the first speeches, the first one he made abroad, was made in Al-Azhar University in Egypt, surrounded by scholars and Muslim Brotherhood members. And this had been convened with the help of a man called Mahdi Bray of the MAS, the Muslim American Society, a Muslim Brotherhood front group in America. The Arab Spring took off, started off in Egypt, and they believed in America that by playing nicey nice with the Muslim Brotherhood, that they could actually capture the hearts and minds of the Muslim world.
Yeah.
What they actually did, they set up the stage for Islamic State and, you know, the white helmet, black helmet business in. They created a monster. And then at the end of Obama's term in office, he gave $221 million, 8 years later, to the Palestinian Authority. Now, Mahmoud Abbas does exactly what happened when in 2003, there was an incursion into Gaza, and they found the Bethlehem Orphans Fund and things like that. They were found out how much money was being rerouted to jihadi type organizations.
Mm-hmm.
But in Gaza, the Bethlehem Orphans Fund was set up to give money to people who had families of people who had either been killed or injured while fighting against Jewish people. Now, exactly the same thing is done by Mahmoud Abbas in the so-called peaceful West Bank. He gives money out to the people who have been injured in the violent struggle against mainly Jewish civilians. And this is the thing about Obama I could never understand. Why did he give? As well as freeing Chelsea Manning, as his last gift before leaving, but to give $221 million to Mahmoud Abbas, who is a virulent anti-Semite, who said publicly that when there is a Palestinian homeland, there will be no room for Jews in it. I mean, this hatred, it's pathological. It's not something that you can't say, do something humane and philanthropic to one of these politicians, Islamist politicians, and expect them to be to respect you and treat you fairly. They'll still want to kill you. I'm sorry, it's an awful truth, and this is what I've become so angry. It's why I've come out of my retirement to actually have sort of a bit of a rant and a moan. What happened on October the 7th was horrific.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been reading some of the descriptions of, what's gone on. I'm not going to even talk, but they're just so horrific against civilians, just getting on with their lives in peaceful, civilized lives. And these people, I mean, half of the people who are in Gaza, they're not even from that region anyway. They just got, into that region because they went there to fight and got locked in there,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Hamas hasn't let them leave. When they had the first elections, Hamas won the elections in February, it was, I believe, 2006. They were throwing all of the Fatah members off the tops of buildings.
Yep.
That's the sort of savagery in their approach to democracy. And I'm sorry, all of the people who are suffering, there must be many women and children suffering, but they've been brought up to believe madness. And I'm sorry, it's like if a dog has rabies, you don't want it to go running around and biting everybody.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know. But I really think that we need to be, no matter who you are, but I'm particularly at the moment really upset about what's happening with Jewish people. I mean, I lived in Stamford Hill for 15 years in London. Mostly Orthodox Jewish people. Very peaceful. You would never do anything to harm anyone. And recently they have had something like 500 to 600 attacks in the last month since this event that happened in Israel.
Yeah, they're saying
the
that
amount of hatred there.
They're saying worldwide the anti-Semitic incidents are up 600%.
Yeah. And it's just terrible. I mean, it was a peaceful, I loved Stamford Hill.
It's scary.
Yeah. But before I left, I had to come down. My mother had Alzheimer's. Someone had to look after her. I had to leave. But before I left, I noticed something which was happening. People in Stamford Hill, the Orthodox community buys up houses, and when you've got 5 children, you can live in a house. But what was happening there was some of those houses were being bought up by Muslim groups to then have Muslim schools in the area. And it's not a Muslim area. And it was getting there was a place called Castleknoe Road, and on the corner of there and Osbodeston Road, where there'd been a little Jewish school for years and years. About on the corner, they built a Muslim school. And then I would, cycle past on my bicycle, and there'd be fights between, where the Jewish kids were being provoked by the Muslim kids. And it's almost like people on the town council were trying to provoke it. I mean, our member of parliament was a woman called Diane Abbott, who was a race-baiting daft cow. I'm sorry, she used to have a physical sexual relationship with Jeremy Corbyn, who was an out-and-out anti-Semite, who was head of the Labour Party until fairly recently.
Who is now back in power, right?
Who's the guy back in power now is David Cameron. David Cameron was the prime minister who said we can have a referendum on Brexit and we can leave the EU. I voted for that because I didn't want it. He then ran away. But 2010, he met with Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Turkish president, and told him that Israel treats the people of Gaza as if they're living in a prison camp. And he's really just not a good person to, he's done so many deals. I really think it's a very, very bad news for, people who are Jewish in Britain at the moment. And, I've gone from somebody who's pro-conservative to I want, this government to fall. And I want the opposition to fall as well, I'm afraid. I just don't see any hope. Because half of the opposition were happy to have Jeremy Corbyn, an anti-Semite, as their leader, and denying all of the anti-Semitism that was going on. They got a woman from a group called Liberty who did a report on anti-Semitism and said there is no anti-Semitism when it was just blatant. When members of parliament who were Jewish had to resign, they couldn't cope with all the abuse they were getting for being Jewish. There is a real crisis going on here, and I think you've either got to stand up for what's right or you're not. But if you stand up and if you even dare to criticize any aspect of Islam, as I have done in the past, you get labeled and blacklisted as a Nazi and a racist and an Islamophobe. I had Saudi Arabia's Arab News said that I was a leader of the English Defence League. I had nothing to do with them. I had a group called Hope Not Hate, another Labour-owned organisation, said that I lived in Norway, in Oslo, and I helped to influence Anders Behring Breivik, the guy who killed 69 people on an island in Utøya. And I've never been to any Scandinavian country in my life. But this is what happens when you stand up and you say what you believe, and you know what you believe in is right, then you have this machinery. Now, the people who were mainly slandering me, a man called David Miller, he used to be the professor of sociology at Strathclyde University. Then he went to Bath University. Then he went to Bristol University. He ran a lot of organizations, Spinwatch, Powerwatch, and others, where various people were blacklisted. He quoted a definition of his definition was based on Kevin MacDonald, who's a racist, of how Jewish people are out to control the world and I was told that my support for Israel and Jews was to cover up my innate racism by this guy. And he's now fortunately been exposed. He was upsetting Jewish students by asking them if they were Jewish. And he's now been sacked and he's now no longer employable. But it's taken years. It was 2009 September when he started his hit campaign against me. And you can't stand up and be counted in Britain without having people who you've never known accusing you of things you've never done.
Right. Yeah.
Which is a bizarre situation. I mean, I'm old and I'm dying slowly, so I'm quite happy to say what I want. You know, I don't have much life left, but while I've got life, I'm going to bite again. I think, you know, I'm thanking you very much for letting me come out of my hole and snarl a bit. But I just think it's terrible. What is happening now is it's been going on for so long. Tony Blair, when he was in power, did deals with the Muslim Association of Britain and the Muslim Council of Britain. I mean, I went on Iran's press TV, didn't take a fee, to argue with Dawood Abdullah in September 2009. He was the guy who had said the Blair, it was Brown by then, but the government, the Labour government at that time, had entertained the Muslim Brotherhood as a representative body of Muslims, even though they refused to allow Ahmadis, who are peaceful Muslims who don't believe in war, they refused to accept them because they're not proper Muslims. And the government, the Labour government under first Tony Blair and then Gordon Brown, they dealt with the Muslim Brotherhood as their advisors up until Dawood Abdullah said that if anybody tried to break the legal sea blockade against Gaza, well, that bit of, you know, that he would happily fight against the British Navy. What happened was later in 2010, you had the Mavi Marmara and other groups, again funded by Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, who was senior advisor for the Muslim Brotherhood. He was based in Qatar, where he would have his. He was the guy who, in 2006, had said it was legitimate to kill Jewish civilians. And we in Britain, during that era, had actually paid for him to go from Qatar to a Muslim conference in Turkey. We had him, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, in 2004, had been invited by Ken Livingstone, the London Labour mayor, to come and visit. And the mayor said that Qaradawi was likened to Pope John Paul, the reforming Pope. I mean, this is absolute insanity. And he was a senior figure in Labour, on the national executive of the Labour team. And it was only when Dawood Abdullah, who I argued against on Iran's press TV, I mean, he was, you know, going on about, oh, it's just not fair. We can't fight to defend ourselves. And I just said casually to him, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. And it was like I'd lit a firework. The bugger exploded with rage, you know, frothing, which was quite fun. But it's just sort of these morons. That was the moment that they decided not to have these people as advisors. It's ridiculous. If you just, because somebody says we represent this group of all one religion, there are always sects and there's always different schools of thought in any sensible religion does have different schools of thought. You know, it's like rabbinical discussions, you know. Yeah. They find wisdom through arguing and discussing. They don't have this blanket thing, but because of lazy politics, it's happened in America. You know, the advisors who got Obama to go and preach at Al-Azhar University to Muslim Brotherhood members. It's gone on there. You know, it's a really, once you get that sort of farming out of your policies to unelected people who say that they represent whole communities, you're playing identity politics, and that's the way to failure. Either you treat everybody as equal people politically, as citizens, or you don't. And
Right.
everything now is, it's top trumps. At the moment, Muslims, there are more of them, so they get in Britain special treatment. And I'm suppose in parts of America
Yep.
where you got sanctuary cities, it's not, you got Dearborn and places where, yes, the Muslims have the so-called upper hand, but in other groups down south, it's probably going to be mostly Mexicans who've got, some cachet politically, that they got leverage. And I just think, at the end of the day, if we allow ourselves to be bullied by dogma, Muhammad was not a very nice man. Surah 8 of the Quran is all about his caravan raiding. That isn't exactly that's not the work of a mystic. He may have started off as a mystic who used to get visions and have nice poetry that pleased people's ears. By the end of his life, he was rabid. He was sexually incontinent.
Caligula, was the same way.
Yeah, I'm sure he was a lovely guy when he was a child, but became a monster.
Okay, Adrian, I'm gonna turn you down. We're gonna sign off. Please stay on the line.
Yeah, sure.
And
sure.
I'll get back
I'm
with you.
sorry if I've ranted. I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm actually glad that you did. I'm glad we were able to give you the opportunity to do that.
I feel good. I didn't got it off my chest.
I kept my promise and I didn't speak.
I'm so sorry, Rabbi Ancel. I'm really sorry.
No.
I didn't want to
It's
stop
perfectly
you.
fine.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn
I
you...
really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I'm going to turn
Nice
you down on
talking
the
to you.
broadcast here for a moment, and we're going to thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope you got something out of the discussion. We're very, very privileged to have Adrian Morgan join us this evening and go into the history of the Muslim Brotherhood and some other things. Tomorrow night is the Torah study, Parshat Toldot, with myself and Rabbi Ancel again. And then Friday evening is the Kabbalat and Ma'ariv Shabbat service, all at 8 p.m. Eastern. 10 a.m. on Shabbat is Shachrit Musaf. And then back for Monday, which is Zeta Story Corner, and then right back here on next Tuesday for the Rabbis Discuss. Next week, and Adrian is, of course, is welcome to come back. Next week, we are going to talk about the San Remo Peace Conference, which established the Palestinian Mandate and how everything that the UN has done after that has been in violation of international law. So it should be another interesting evening. So thanks everybody for being here. Until the next time, we will simply say, Laila Tov.